Hey there everyone, and welcome to a new Let's Play. So today we're going to check out Capitalism Lab. So this is an economic business production manufacturing simulator. Very complex. Does have a very steep learning curve, but it's one of those games that once you jump into and sort of get to grips with it, it is an amazing the amount of depth and work that has gone into this. So many of you may have heard of Capitalism 2, which was around many years ago, and this is basically the reboot. So they've taken that engine and put a whole lot of work into this, and a lot of upgrades, a lot of new features and all that kind of stuff. So we're running the subsidiary DLC. So there is another DLC, I think Cities and Growth or Cities and something, coming out quite soon, which is basically focused around actually building up a city from scratch. And that's in the beta phase at the moment, so I could have actually downloaded that and run it, but given that it is in beta, there are a few bugs and stuff still to be worked out. So I thought we'd just run with the fully released DLC. So what we're going to do today is jump into a custom game. So there are a whole bunch of scenarios here which we can play, but we're just going to run into a custom game which gives us a little bit more scope. So we've got our color, our logo, our portrait, and our name here. We're going to set up the difficulty custom as we run through. I'm not going to run through too much of this just because it's all sort of a little bit too, takes a little bit too much to explain, but so the big features are that we're going to be running with 6 cities, moderate startup capital starting in 1990, and most of the other stuff is fairly standard. Yep. We're running with 10 competitors and they have low startup capital, which actually means that they'll have a similar startup capital to what we will. Aggressiveness is high, expertise level is high, and local competitors' expertise is, or competence is high as well. Products, everything is being enabled, and the seaports, we have 2 seaports each, so that's sort of our starting access to a bunch of resources there. We're not running with any goals here at the moment, so this is basically just a complete sandbox, and we're just going to run it until we basically decide that we've had enough. And the other thing we're going to do is actually load in a script here. So this script basically is, so what it means is that every player in the game, or every person in the game, has an expertise level, and that determines the rate at which your technologies or your research and development progresses. So basically, we're running with an expertise in watches, so we're producing a whole bunch of different ranges of watches, and there's a whole group of different categories and all these different types of products and product classes that you can create. But I ran with watches basically because it's not super high tech and it's not super low tech. It's sort of in the middle, so it should give us a good crack at doing a whole bunch of different things in the game. Okay, so this is the game screen, guys. As you can see, graphics, you know, fairly simple, but we don't really need any more for what we're going to use it for. You know, it is a sort of a game that's based in the back end of the screens. So we've set up our headquarters in Paris, and this is Paris in the game. Obviously, it's not meant to be mimic real life. And as we can see here, this is where all the game occurs, all the numbers in the entire world, and which is why it can be really overwhelming to start with, is that there's so much information and so many sort of little integrated little, you know, mechanics and stuff that play into this game. So run through some basic stuff to start with. So we are running with 6 cities, so Paris, Lisbon, Harbin, I don't know where Harbin is actually in real life, Auckland, Portland, and Tel Aviv. So those are our cities. A lot of actually quite high population cities. Normally you don't sort of get quite that many, so that's probably actually good news for us. Although it also does make sense with 10 competitors, it probably actually bumps up the level of population levels of the cities, actually, now that I think about it. Okay, so these are all our competitors here. They all have different expertises. There's another guy with watch expertise. Oh no, so that's going to be probably our biggest. First guy we click on has the same expertise as what we do. That's interesting. That's going to be very interesting then. You see all these people have different, you know, sort of expertises. Like example, these guys, his expertise is making toys, and all these different sort of categories or, you know, profiles and personalities. You know, sort of sets up their different traits. So every AI competitor is very different, and they all have their own little ways of doing things, and some of them are going to be very aggressive against you, some of them are sort of just going to sit back and do their own thing, and it just really depends on what you actually run up against. So, I can't believe it. So we do have another company that specializes in watches as well, and has a big focus on research and development, so that's very interesting. So we can check out his personality. Mr. Martin Trago. So invests a lot in research and development, not a lot in training, Not a lot in advertising. Doesn't do much stocks and takeovers. Does strengthen corporation ownership. That basically means that he will seek to buy back shares in the company to avoid potential takeovers. So you can see he controls the company, but he only has 14% of the company. Whereas we actually have 50%. So no matter what happens at the moment, as long as we maintain the 50%, well actually it should be 50% plus 1, but as long as we maintain about a 50% share in our company, we can't actually be taken over. So this actually sort of does open up. I mean, basically most of the companies start in a similar level, around about 20 to 30% of the company that they own. And so he'll probably seek to buy back as many shares as quickly as possible as he can. But given that he has such a low ownership percentage, it does actually open up the possibility for us to actually take him over and actually merge with his company. So that's something, especially given that he specializes in the same thing. Like, he's probably going to compete with us quite early on. So we may look at doing that. So as I mentioned, we're making watches. So if we look into the manufacturer's guide, so here are all the product classes here down this little section. So there's all the different product classes that you can create. Basically, product classes are what you have your expertise in, and then from there you actually have, it breaks down into different product types. So for example, in the watch category, watch product class, there are 3 product types. So elegant watch, silver watch, and sports watch. And each of these have different sort of requirements in terms of the materials that materials needed to create this product. And they also have other different qualities. So for example, if we come down here to elegant watch. So necessity index is 20%. So basically it means it's not a particularly sort of everyday staple item. So for example, if we search for something like bread. So bread has a necessity index of 70%, so it's very high. So it's sort of something people need quite often, whereas watches aren't. So watches are sort of this bit of a luxury item. So that means that basically, when things are good, our sales are going to be fantastic when everyone has a lot of cash just fling around. But if we go through a recession or something similar, the economy as it goes through a downturn, it means our product sales are going to decrease quite a lot. Basically because people don't have the cash to spend on a luxury item anymore. So we have to keep a close eye on the economy throughout the cities and how these cities are going. That will impact where we expand to first and how we actually run our sales and the number of stores and all that kind of stuff. So obviously there is a complete sort of background economy that runs throughout the whole game and also throughout each city. So each city has different criteria or different sort of statistics. So population obviously is one, population growth, quality of life, unemployment rate, housing supply and demand, and office supply and demand. And they also have underlying GDP, real wage rate, and the inflation, and then the loan interest rates and consumer price indexes. And all of these are different throughout the cities, and they will sort of adjust over time as well. So what we're going to do to start with, guys, this is sort of a basic opening in for most sort of starts in Capitalism Lab, is we're going to run into retail to start with, but not watch retail. So basically we're going to have to set up a production manufacturing system or factories to actually produce our watches, but we're actually not going to start with that, basically because we want to do a little bit of research and development to start with to get our little quality, or get the quality of our products up before we actually launch them onto the market, and that should give us a really good boost to start with. So what we're going to do, given we only have 30 million in cash, it's not a huge amount of money, it's probably not really enough to set up a whole manufacturing and production line yet. So what we're going to do is just start with basic retail. So basically we're just going to set up in, it's probably a discount mega store maybe, or a department store. One of the two, probably go for a department store actually, it's a little bit cheaper. And all we're going to do is basically we're going to be buying and selling products. We're going to be buying products that are already being produced. And they're being produced by overseas manufacturers. And the way we access those are through seaports. So we click on this seaport here. So we've got, what, four seaports. 4 seaports per city. 2 of them import consumer products and 2 of them import industrial products. So obviously industrial products means things like steel, chemical minerals, silica, all that kind of stuff, things that need to be processed or manufactured into other things. And then there's 2 here that are actually producing or importing products that are already fit for sale, so consumer products. Basically, this is what we're going to be selling to start with. We're going to be selling a range of these products. And that's how we're going to start making our initial cash. So first thing we're going to look at here, up in this right hand section, we've got land value, and this indicates basically, obviously, as it indicates land value. And land value is a very good indication of traffic index. And traffic index basically means how much foot traffic your store is actually going to get. So we come in here, click on retail store, click on a department store. It's worth mentioning each of these are all specialty stores. So for example, this is what we're going to end up building: jewelry and watch shops. And they can only sell jewelry and watches, whereas a department store can sell pretty much everything. So the specialized shops have a big advantage over sort of these generalist shops when they're selling similar products. For example, so if a jewelry and watch shop is selling watches, and so is a department store, the jewelry and watch shop, given that it's a specialist shop, is going to have a far higher sort of attractiveness to customers, because it is specialized, and that sort of, people want to go where things are specialized, where they sort of, get the best knowledge and value and information, all that kind of stuff. But for start with, given we're selling general stuff, that doesn't matter. So we click on department store, and we see a little bunch of numbers changing here throughout. So what we're going to do, biggest thing we're looking at is customer traffic index, which is in the top left-hand corner. So we're basically looking to get that number as high as possible. So given we say this is a high land value, probably the highest section in Paris at the moment, we're trying to find a really good spot to put it. So we've got a 51 there, got 30s, 20s, probably 51, unfortunately. It's not really high, it's not too bad, I guess. There is things that we can do later on to actually boost that ourselves. There's another 51 there. But 54 is looking good. So generally you probably want, this will change over time. As this area gets built up, you'll have more apartment buildings and offices and things get built up, and more shops built up around this area, which will increase the traffic index, fairly quickly. But to start with, so you actually see the closer in we get, so there's a 90 there, but obviously it's completely taken. We can't build on this block anywhere because it's taken up by buildings that can't be bought out. So I'm thinking the 54 right there is going to be perfect for us. You can see the building cost 820,000 and the land cost is $16.5 million. So that is quite high, given this is Paris. Paris has a very high, given that it is quite a wealthy city. So we're looking here, quality of life is 58. What else are we looking at? Like the real wage rate is very high as well. That sort of basically is an indication of the fact that Paris has high land value. So all these different cities are going to have different rates. So for example, Harbin. I don't know where Harbin is in real life. Anyone knows, look in the comments, let me know. It has a real wage rate of 29 and a quality of life index of 31. So I'm going to bet pretty much that Harbin has very low land value. So we come in here to Harbin, into the center, the highest area of land value. So looking here, so we're getting a 57 there. Land cost is only $6.5 million. So that's an example there. Different cities have different costs for land value, which is going to play a very big part when we set up our manufacturing and production system. But for now, we're just going to set up a department store in Paris, 54 there, so we can set that up. Okay, so we have our first department store, our first store. We've got 12 million in cash, 12.6 million left. And we've got to set up a whole bunch of products. So the way things work is these are your product lines up here. So what we're going to do now is jump in here, click on a new product line to set it up. We're going to jump down here into suppliers. We want to come from the seaports. So see here we've got seaports and then all the different competitors. So basically you can choose to buy all these different products from your competitors or from yourself. And for now we're going to buy from the seaports. So pretty much it's not going to matter a whole lot what we buy. Although generally I like to buy higher priced items. So for example, soap, you've got to sell a lot of soap to make significant money, but you don't have to sell as many, for example, TVs or even sweaters to sort of make the same amount of money. And obviously that's reflected, you are going to sell a lot more, but I think it's just a little bit easier to sort of sell these items. You're also looking for highest quality as possible and also lowest freight charges to make sure. So for example, this is $65. But we're paying $5.46 in freight, whereas the golf clubs are only $17 and we're only paying $2.86. So they are relative to the prices, but I'm thinking televisions are really good because $178 and only freight charge of $10. That is quite a good item to start with there. Just going to run the game a little bit just slowly because it does take a little bit of time for these items to filter through. So we can set up a new item now. We go for high systems. That's two sort of high priced items there. And now we're going to run into sweaters and also probably golf clubs. So there we go. There's our first 4 initial items set up. So we're going to pause the game again quickly. So we've run through, what, 7 days. So we can see here a whole bunch of information. So I'm not going to run this basically as a tutorial. I'm just going to explain sort of key concepts as much as I can without sort of spending 1,000 years, because it does take a very, very long time to actually run through all this kind of stuff. Basically, the most important things we're looking for here, these are all sort of our, this sort of area here is how our shop is actually set up. So you have different units. They all do different things, basically, and you can configure this however you want. So as you can see, it's set this up for me automatically, and there's no real reason to actually change this right now. But for the moment, this is how we're going to leave things. So we have a purchasing unit and then a sales unit, and we have one of those for each product that we're selling. And it's fairly self-explanatory. So the purchasing unit obviously purchases it, sources the product from the supplier, makes the orders, all that kind of stuff. And then the sales unit is the one for actually in charge of actually selling the product. Generally, you can have 2 sales units per 1 purchasing unit without running into any problems. But for now, this is totally fine. We may adjust that later on. So what we're going to look at now, guys, so these 2 bars, I'm not sure how well you guys can see this, but next to each product, there's 2 bars on the left-hand side, and then some smaller ones on the right. On the left-hand side here, these are our supply and demand bars. You also see those down here in the product, supply and demand, they change for each product. And also here through all our different units, and basically they all represent different things. So there are different supply and demand for the units, and then there are for the for example, the overall products, especially when you're adding multiple units. So for example here, golf clubs, supply and demand. So we've got basically 50% demand for supply at the moment. And so we'll keep an eye on this and see how that runs. First thing we want to do here though, is actually look in and see at our overall ratings down here. These basically indicate how appealing a product is to consumers and how likely they are to purchase. So for example, currently our overall rating is only $50. Overall rating is only 50, but the average rating is actually 70. So that's because there are very high branded products here. So the overall rating is affected by 3 things. So brand, quality, and price. Those 3 things make up the overall rating. You can see the breakdown of those in the little bar here. So we're going to do something about here. We don't have any brand, and we're actually not going to spend any money on advertising, given that these aren't our actual products, and we're not really interested in wasting money to start with. Although now that I actually look at this is potentially an indication that we actually don't want to sell televisions, because the reason is the city average price for a television is $260. We're actually buying this for $189, so that's really massively cut down on our profit margin there. So we're going to lower our price a whole lot, basically, to compete with these items. We do have a very vastly higher quality rating, but we don't have any brand rating, so we have to keep an eye on this and see how we go here. Same thing with this one, actually, is actually products are quite cheap here. It's not normally this cheap starting out in a game, so we'll keep an eye on these and we'll run through these in a few days. So sweaters are actually better here. So we've got very, very high quality compared to the city average, and the prices are comparable. So we should have a very quite decent run here at this product. So we'll just lower it a little bit under the city average, and we'll keep an eye on these ratings as we go. And golf clubs are very, very good things to sell at the moment, because our overall rating to start with is very, very high compared to the average, which means we should be able to get a very good market share quite quickly. And also the price is actually lower, so we can actually bump this up into here. So we're not particularly interested in market share at the moment, more around profitability, and that's pretty much it. Everything else we're going to leave for the moment. The next thing we're going to do straight away though is come into Haben, which is where we're going to eventually set up our manufacturing and production lines in here. What we're going to do is set up a little area which is going to end up being our manufacturing area. I'm thinking maybe just over in this little corner just for the fun of it. And the first thing we're going to do is set up an R&D center. And you see here, so the closer in you get to the city, the more that land costs. So keep an eye on that land cost as we come out towards the edge of the city. So it's sitting there at $1.09 million. The further out we come, the lower it drops until it reaches a minimum of $946,000 out here. So that's where we're going to basically buy in as close to the city as we possibly can. Although we could actually, there is a strategy of basically buying up things close into the city centre. Because obviously you would think generally over the course of the game land costs or land prices are going to increase. So what you do is to start with, you buy land up quickly or cheaply in the centre of the city here, and you actually put your things like factories in areas like this. So it will cost you a little bit more initially, but over the course of the game, basically what happens is you can actually relocate your factory. Once land prices come up quite a bit, you can relocate your factory from here out to the cheaper areas of the suburbs, and actually replace it with things like apartment buildings, and you actually get a very, very good increase, massive sort of profit windfall from actually doing that. So we may even do that. We may start doing that. We may put our first R&D center there. So that did cost us around $4 million, which is a fair bit, but that's fine. Well, actually, the first thing we're going to do here is actually bump up the training to maximum. So you notice we didn't do that on our store. That's because what training does is actually trains up your units in here. So once we set up some R&D units here, they actually get trained up they start at level 1, they can actually get trained up to a maximum of level 9. And as you would think, the higher level, the more efficient they are. So for an R&D center, the higher level they are, the more quickly they research, and also the better sort of returns you'll get on your technology advances. So what we can do here is set up product R&D. I think what I may do, so it's going to cost $145,000 per unit. So it's 450, 150, probably going to cost us what, $1.7 million ish to set up a full manufacturing unit. Which is a lot of money to start with, but I think it may be worth it because I think it could get us a really massive increase. Alright, so what we're going to do, guys, set up full R&D units for all of this. Okay, so that cost us a fair bit, that's fine. Now what we can do is set up linkages. So you can see these little, I'm not sure, they're a little bit hard to see, but there's little links between each box. And basically, so in our store before, here we are, department store. You can see this little connector here. So the purchasing unit is connected to the sales unit, but these units aren't connected to any other unit. And so that's basically how you set up multiple product lines within the same store. So for example, in the research and development center here, we want every unit actually to be linked. So we're basically just going to set up this, basically have every unit connected. So I think that should be, might as well just put in everyone while we're here. I think there is probably a more efficient way to do it, but that's what we're going to do. And what this means is what we're going to do is actually this center unit, we're going to set up our R&D here, and we're going to start off selling sports watches. And so we click on this, and we're going to do 1 year development. And you see here, because this is, so basically what happens in research is that you choose a unit which is sort of the central unit, and if you've got other R&D units connected to it, to that central unit, then they all are included in the research. So for example, if we terminate that now, and we actually get rid of the connector for this unit, so this unit is now isolated. So we go start R&D sports watches, 1 year, you actually see this unit is now not included, and actually our overall tech gain is actually decreased. So it was 76, so it's going from 30 and going up to 74 now, but with this unit it actually goes up to 76. 76. So you actually see that each unit of these actually increases your overall tech gain. So it doesn't increase the speed, but it increases how much gain you actually get on your technology per sort of cycle that you choose. So I'm going to reconnect this one here. And terminate that, start again, and for 1 year, and we actually see that's going up to 76 now. So in 1 year, our technology is going to jump from 30 to 76 in 1 year. That is a very, very big increase and quite a high technology level to start with. So we're just going to leave that area to do that R&D thing to do its thing, and I'm pretty sure we can actually start the game running now. So we've spent Quite a bit of money, so $25-ish million, and or 26 actually, $24 million, and we're pretty much ready to run. So we're going to run the game on sort of medium speed at the moment. I'm just going to jump in here and keep an eye on things in here. So see our overall rating, because we've decreased the price, it's now jumped up to 71. I'm actually going to decrease it another $10-ish. Just give us a little bit more rating. So you basically want to max out our supply and demand as much as possible. You see golf clubs here already are maxed out. So what we're going to do is bump the speed down again. Given that our overall rating is so high, you see our market share has jumped up dramatically for golf clubs, most out of any product. That's because we have the most overall, the highest sort of gap between overall product rating and the overall average, city average, which means that people are, we're giving a vastly better product to customers, and that's why we're getting a very, very quick market share. But given that we not particularly interested in market share because these aren't our actual products, we're going to bump this up to the city average. And so that's going to drop our rating down to 39, but it's still a very, very high increase. And it may even bump it up higher because basically there's no particular, we can't increase our supply of this product. We can't buy any more of this product. But what I'm actually going to do now, given that golf clubs are so successful, I'm actually going to add in a second sales unit and hook it up to this purchasing unit here. So you see that little connector? So this purchase unit is now connected to these two sales units. That means that we should be able to, and just quickly, so you see this sales unit here. So this is actually what's being reflected down supply and demand here. So supply is the yellow bar, demand is the orange bar. You can see that demand is far greater than the sales unit can actually sell them at. So, demand is far higher than they can actually, they can't keep up with demand. But if you switch over, the actual position is pretty much reversed in the purchasing unit. So the purchasing unit can keep up with supply, or your demand is basically sort of only a quarter of supply. So the purchasing unit has a far greater capacity to actually, pass on a lot more units, which is why you can generally have 2 sales units per 1 purchasing unit. So now we've connected that up, we bump it up again. This supplied bar should actually start increasing a little bit. Although it's not, so there's massive demand for actually golf clubs. See the supply bar is coming up slowly. So that's because we're getting more supply through. So basically a bigger throughput. And the demand bar has crept up for the purchasing unit there as well. So what you'll notice here, so our market share is increasing very, very quickly. So in 3 months, we've sort of basically cornered a third of the market already, which is very, very good. And you see here already, so we're in 3 months into the game. I'm just going to bump the speed down again. So 3 months into the game, and we're actually seeing a profit of $1.33 million a year. So this is our rolling 12-month profit. And yeah, so that's really good. So that is fantastic. So you actually run into like each product. So for example, the golf clubs here. So we're selling about 16,000 golf clubs per month. So that's our quantity there. Revenue is $2 million, and our profit is, a decent chunk of that as well. So sweaters. So sweaters are under the product rating, or under the overall city average. So I'm just going to drop the price just a little bit. And hi-fi systems are fine. We have a little bit of a gap there, so that's totally fine. We'll leave it as is. And supply and demand. So generally, when you're manufacturing your own products, there's a whole bunch of different strategies around supply and demand. But with these ones, what we're basically going to do is increase, given that there's no real point actually adding in extra supply and demand, or extra supply into the market. We could open up a second store, which I may do, but I'm thinking probably not for the moment. What I think we're going to do, basically just keep increasing the price until supply and demand are fairly even. So on sweaters, we've already reached that point. On TVs, we're going to bump up the price. Even if it means falling under the city overall average, I'm going to do it. So I'm basically going to keep increasing this until the levels are about the same, if not a little bit lower. So I'll bump that up again. So around about the same there, and we can do the same here for the hi-fi systems. So they're about average, and golf clubs again. There we go. So that's a little bit under. So that should over time increase or decrease the demand, basically because people do have alternatives. So the demand is actually going to be a little bit less. So that's basically our theory. So I'm just going to bump this up again. So what this is doing, guys, so generally this, I mean, there's two ways you can sort of, when you launch your own products, there's two things that you can do. So given that I said before, we're not interested in market share because we can't sort of add in huge amounts of extra supply to come in and dominate the market. So given that we're buying products in already, basically what we're interested in is maximizing our profit at, as much as we possibly can. So here, guys, so we've actually seen another company has already set up another store. So you come over here, they've set up a discount mega store and they're selling golf clubs as well. So that's why we've got here in a competition with market share as well. So that's another thing. But anyway, so there's two things you can do with your products. You can either look at maximizing market share, and generally you do that by having an overall rating which is quite a bit higher than the average, and also higher than your competitors. Basically, that means that you're offering a far superior product for multiple reasons, and that increases your market share. Then there's actually running into maximizing your profit, and you do that by basically maxing out supply and demand. So you're not particularly focused on market share as much. You're just basically focused on maximizing your supply and demand and reaching that equilibrium. So you're not wasting supply and you're also not wasting demand. And so basically so for example here, golf clubs. So we've got a lot of basically say third extra demand. So we can actually increase our prices, and so we can't sell anymore. So for example here, we can't actually sell any more product. So there's no real point to us keeping the prices lower and sort of having too much demand, because we're not gaining anything by that. So basically what we're going to do is increase our prices so we're maximizing our profit for the amount of supply that we can generate. And so that's the entire idea. So that's what we're going to do here. We're just going to keep increasing prices until supply and demand actually sort of reach an equilibrium. So not interested in market share, that's fine. If it drops down, that's totally fine. I'm not bothered by that at all. So we can do this for all our products. Basically just keep maximizing our profit margins as much as we possibly can. Squeeze as much profit out of these products as we can. So you see the golf clubs, the supply is actually increasing. So actually not the supply that's increasing, it's the demand that actually is decreasing. And you see here that our profit is increasing quite quickly. So I've run through 6 months of the year and we're sitting at $5.5 million profit over the 12-month period. So that is quite good. So basically this is what we're going to run with for the next 6 months. And then once we've hit our research and development, has done research and development for a year, then we're going to drop, sort of, move away from this kind of stuff and actually start getting into some manufacturing. So you can see how is almost reaching equilibrium here. Now market share is dropping. So then basically what I'm doing is just, as you saw then, I just dropped the prices to sort of basically try and reach equilibrium. So we're maximized our profit for the amount of product that we can actually sell. I'm not bothered by these guys actually maximizing market share, even though they've opened up actually an R&D center. So they're still only selling the same amount of golf clubs as us, basically. But we're sort of focused on maximizing profit, which is what we're doing here at the moment. So we're selling around about 16,000 units per month, which is fine. And yeah, so that's good. Good. You actually see we're running into problems now because there's two stores actually selling the same product. It means that this is the seaport where we're buying it from is actually not really being able to meet demand anymore. So this is probably going to change my strategy. Instead, you see our profit is starting to slump, is basically because we're not able to meet sort of the same demand as the supply, because two stores are buying that same product. Yeah, so supply for the overall purchasing supply, the actual seaport levels, supply levels are actually dropping as well. So that's totally fine. I'm not too bothered by that at the moment. I think we're pretty much reached a decent point here. There's probably no real point to running. So you'll see things have actually sort of basically maxed out, and we've basically hit our levels here. So we could increase our profits again, our prices again, but I don't think it's particularly worth. I think we've reached a decent level here. So you can see we've made a fair bit of cash back on our investment already. And you can actually see though some centers, some other companies are already starting to open up stores and R&D centers and all this kind of stuff around here. So pretty soon this whole city is going to be very, very crowded. But that's all pretty good for the moment. It's actually running at 35 minutes in the episode, guys. So I think we might actually pause it here. So we haven't really got a whole lot into the game. We might actually just run into the end of the first year, and then next episode we'll actually pick up and start doing some manufacturing and setting up our watch line. What I'm going to do at the end of this month, you can bump up the speed a little bit. So you can see here our profit, we're making a fair bit of profit, which is really good. Everything's going fairly well. We've maxed out our levels. I'm actually going to start dropping our prices of our golf clubs here because our profits dropped a fair bit because we've actually decreased demand quite a bit. So that's totally fine. Just bump up a little bit again. Okay, you heard that little bell sound. So that is the signal that our R&D on our watch is now complete. So our technology level is now 73, which is brilliant. So we're going to change this. We'll do that next episode though. So what I'm really focused on actually now is jumping in and seeing if our competition here, so Relay Power, whether they've actually started manufacturing, and they haven't. So all they've got now are retail stores. So they're not manufacturing yet, anything yet. So we actually can't see their technology level. Although if we come into here, technology, here we go. So if we scroll down to sports watches, so we actually see our technology level is 73. The top tech is 100. We actually see that's the same for all of them, and I think that's for overseas producers. So obviously, at least we know that the competition aren't researching yet either, and we actually know that as well by the fact they actually don't have any R&D centers. So we come in here into their company, into their firms, and all they've got is retail stores. So they're not doing any research whatsoever, which is very interesting. You would have thought they would have done a little bit of research to start with, but they're obviously focusing on profit, which is fine. Like, they're making a lot more profit than what we are. So they're making $29 million a year profit, and we're only making 13. And that's because they have 4 stores and we have 1. But that's fine. That's not particularly what I'm interested in. What I want to do is actually dominate the market for watches. So if I come into corporate details here, into dominance, this is actually where you sort of end up coming with. So these are all the product classes here. So we've come down to watches. So basically we want to dominate watches. We want to dominate these 3 categories of watches. Once we've done that, then we'll move on to other products. But that's what we're focusing our entire attention on right now. Anyway, guys, this is the end of the first episode. Hope you've enjoyed it. Hopefully it wasn't too sort of dry or anything. I realize the game sort of isn't, particularly action-packed or anything, but sort of one of those longer-term strategic games that is sort of, really sucks you in. Sort of, it's not like a one more turn thing because it's real time, but it's sort of, you sort of get really invested in your company, in the competition, and all this kind of stuff. So it's very, very a lot of fun. So I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Hopefully you stick around. I think I'll try and make this into a Let's Play series as long as people are interested. And yeah, let me know any sort of queries, questions, concerns, all that kind of stuff, and I will reply as soon as possible. Okay, everyone, I hope you've all had a wonderful day, and I'll see you all soon.